You see, most of us live as though life was something we had to conquer, as though the world were an enemy to be subdued and the self a fragile fortress to be defended at all costs. And so we resist. We resist the changing tides of circumstance. We resist uncertainty. We resist even our own feelings. But have you not noticed that the more you resist the current, the more it drags you under, like a man caught in the ocean, struggling only to exhaust himself when the secret all along was to float, to trust the water, to let go? Surrender is not weakness. It is not resignation. It is the discovery that you and the flow of life are not at odds, but are one and the same movement. To surrender is to stop clenching your fists at the inevitable and to open your hands to the gift of what is. It is to see that the dance was never meant to be controlled, but to be joined. And when you yield to life rather than fight it, you begin, perhaps for the first time, not merely to exist, but to live. The great paradox of human life is that we spend so much of our time and energy resisting the very currents that make life what it is. From childhood, we are taught to push, to struggle, to try to bend the world to our will, as if existence were an opponent we had to overcome. Yet the more we resist, the more we tighten ourselves, the more we fight the natural flow of events, the more we find ourselves bound in suffering. Resistance is not merely the act of saying no to what we dislike. It is the subtle tension in the body and mind that arises whenever life does not match our expectations. It shows up in the way we clench our jaw when someone says something unkind, in the way we grip our chest when plans fall apart, in the way our thoughts loop endlessly around what should have been instead of what is. This constant resistance is the source of so much human frustration because it sets us against the very fabric of reality itself. Imagine standing in a great river, the current moving with steady force. To resist is to brace yourself against it, to dig your heels into the rocks, to fight the pull of the water with all your strength. For a moment you might believe you are succeeding, but sooner or later the current wears you down, and the effort leaves you exhausted. Life is much the same. Circumstances shift, people change, events unfold in ways we cannot predict. Yet most of us meet these shifts not with fluidity, but with resistance. And in resisting, we create the illusion that we are separate from life, that we are the lone figure standing against an overwhelming force. But this struggle is not necessary, nor is it natural. The river does not fight itself. The ocean does not resist its own waves. Yet somehow human beings have learned to turn against the flow of their own being, to treat life as though it were an enemy to be subdued. The curious thing about resistance is that it is rooted in fear. Fear that if we do not control, life will fall apart. Fear that if we let go, everything will dissolve into chaos. Fear that if we do not protect our image, our position, our expectations, we will be swallowed up by forces larger than ourselves. And yet the very act of resisting magnifies the pain we are trying to avoid. When we resist sadness, it lingers longer. When we resist uncertainty, it grows larger. When we resist failure, we taste it more bitterly. In other words, it is not the experience itself that wounds us most deeply, but the resistance to the experience. A wave comes and goes, but if we stand rigid against it, it knocks us down. If we soften and float, we are carried without harm. Think of a storm. Trees that are stiff and unyielding may break under the pressure of the wind, while those that bend, that sway, that move with the gusts, survive and stand tall after the storm has passed. This is not weakness, it is wisdom. To resist is to put oneself in opposition to forces that will always be greater than our personal will. Death, change, loss, uncertainty, these are not enemies that can be conquered, they are conditions of existence itself. And when we stand against them, we do not diminish their power, we diminish ourselves. In our attempt to hold on, to freeze life into something solid and controllable, we only create more struggle, more suffering, more distance from the living reality unfolding before us. Resistance often masquerades as strength. We imagine that by refusing to yield we are being courageous, that by standing firm against the tides we are proving our resilience. Yet this is a misunderstanding. True strength lies not in the rigidity of resistance, but in the flexibility of acceptance. It is the difference between a clenched fist and an open hand. The fist feels strong, but it cannot receive, it cannot adapt, it cannot hold anything without crushing it. The open hand, by contrast, appears vulnerable, yet it can catch, it can cradle, it can release. Strength is not measured by how tightly we hold on, but by how gracefully we let life move through us. Consider how much of our daily suffering arises not from what is happening, but from what we believe should not be happening. The traffic jam itself is not suffering, it is the resistance to the delay, the story in the mind that we are being robbed of our time, that life is unfair. The criticism itself is not suffering, it is the resistance to the possibility that others see us differently than we wish to be seen. The loss itself is not suffering, it is the resistance to the truth that everything we love is impermanent. In each case, the raw experience is bearable, but the resistance magnifies it into torment. When we resist, we add layers of tension, judgment, and struggle to what is already present, and we mistake this added burden for the experience itself. The irony is that resistance never achieves what it sets out to achieve. We resist in order to preserve our comfort, yet resistance creates discomfort. We resist in order to maintain control, yet resistance reveals how little control we actually have. We resist in order to protect ourselves from pain, yet resistance deepens and prolongs pain. It is as if we are tightening a knot in an attempt to loosen it, straining against the very rope that binds us. The harder we pull, the tighter it becomes. Only when we release the tension does the knot begin to unravel. There is a subtle wisdom in noticing resistance in our own lives. It often arises in small ways: a tense shoulder, a restless thought, a refusal to be with what is. To see resistance is already to weaken its hold, because awareness is the first step in loosening the grip. When we observe our resistance, we begin to realize that it is optional. Life will continue to flow whether we resist or not. The only question is whether we will exhaust ourselves in opposition or relax into the movement. Some might ask, does surrender mean passivity? Does it mean we allow life to trample over us without action or choice? Not at all. Surrender is not about abandoning responsibility. It is about abandoning the illusion of control. It is the recognition that we are participants in a larger process, that our actions are part of the flow rather than separate from it. When we act from surrender, our actions are not driven by fear or rigidity, but by alignment with the moment. We respond rather than react. We move with the current rather than against it. In this way, surrender opens the door to more skillful, more compassionate, and more effective action, because we are no longer blinded by the fog of resistance. The practice of releasing resistance begins in the body. Notice how tension gathers when something unwanted arises. The breath becomes shallow, the muscles tighten, the heart races. By simply breathing deeply, by softening the body, we send a signal to the mind that resistance is not required, that it is safe to be with what is. From here, we can expand this practice into our thoughts and emotions, learning to observe them without judgment, without the constant should and should not that fuel resistance. It is not about forcing acceptance, but about allowing space, giving reality permission to be as it is. Over time, the recognition deepens that resistance is not just a personal habit, but a cultural one. We live in societies that prize control, mastery, domination. We are told to fight aging, to conquer nature, to overcome weakness, to resist anything that threatens the image we hold of ourselves. This cultural conditioning reinforces the illusion that resistance is power, when in truth it is bondage. The more we resist, the more entangled we become in struggle, the more alienated we become from the natural rhythms of life. To awaken from this conditioning is to rediscover a gentler, wiser way of being, one that does not pit us against the world but unites us with it. In moments of deep surrender, one discovers a profound truth: resistance was never necessary. Life is not something happening to us, but through us and as us. We are not separate entities defending ourselves from the flow. We are expressions of the flow itself. The river does not need to resist its own current, it simply moves. The wind does not resist its own blowing, it simply flows. When we see ourselves in the same light, resistance begins to dissolve, and with it, so does much of our suffering. The art of letting go is not a philosophy to be studied from a distance, but a practice woven into the very fabric of existence. From the moment we are born, we cling first to the warmth of the mother, then to possessions, identities, ideas, and finally to a sense of self we believe must remain fixed. We clutch at permanence in a universe that knows nothing of permanence. Yet when we look closely, nothing in life has ever remained still. The seasons shift, the body changes, relationships bloom and dissolve, thoughts rise and vanish, emotions surge and fade. Everything is in flux, and still we grasp. We tighten our grip around what is already slipping through our fingers, as though by sheer force of will we could make the river of life hold still. This is the essence of our suffering. Letting go is not a violent act. It is not tearing ourselves away from something against our will. It is more like exhaling after holding our breath too long. It is the release of unnecessary tension, the loosening of the grasp we never needed in the first place. You see, when you hold your breath, you cannot take in new air. In the same way, when you hold on to what has passed, you leave no room for what wishes to arrive. Life's generosity flows only to the hands that are open, not clenched. To let go is to trust that the opening of your hands will not leave you empty, but will allow them to be filled in ways you could not have predicted. Think of floating on water. The more you thrash, the more you sink. The more you soften, the more the water holds you up. This is the secret many never discover, that life is built to support you if only you stop struggling against it. To let go is to stop insisting that you must swim upstream, to stop demanding that the river carry you in a direction it was never flowing. The river knows where it is going, and you are the river. Trusting this flow is not resignation but recognition. It is the awareness that you do not stand apart from life's movement but are an expression of it. Why do we resist letting go? Because we confuse it with losing. We fear that if we loosen our grip on what we know, on what we have, we will fall into emptiness. But look carefully, emptiness is not a void, it is space, and without space, nothing new can emerge. A room cluttered with old furniture leaves no room for what is fresh. A heart cluttered with old resentments leaves no space for love. A mind cluttered with rigid beliefs leaves no space for insight. To let go is to make space, to clear the ground, to allow life to surprise you. Far from being a loss, it is a gain of freedom, of possibility, of openness. Consider how tightly we cling to our identities. We say, I am this, I am that, I must be seen this way, I must not be seen that way. We create a mask and then spend our days ensuring it does not slip. But the self is not a statue. It is a flame. It flickers, it shifts, it takes on new shapes with each gust of wind. To insist that we are only one fixed self is to deny the richness of our own being. Letting go of identity does not mean becoming no one. It means allowing yourself to be anyone, to be everyone, to be the fluid expression of the moment rather than a prisoner of yesterday's image. In relationships too, letting go is essential. We cling to people not out of love but out of fear. Fear of loss, fear of loneliness, fear of change. Yet love is not about holding someone tightly so they cannot move. Love is like the open sky, in which birds are free to come and go. If they return, it is not because they are trapped, but because the sky itself is home. To let go in love is to trust that connection does not require possession, that intimacy does not require chains. It is to see that clinging kills what it seeks to preserve, while freedom allows love to breathe. Letting go also applies to our pain. How often do we hold on to old wounds, rehearsing them in our minds, replaying the story of how we were wronged? We carry these memories like heavy stones, convinced that to release them would be to excuse what was done. But letting go does not mean condoning. It means recognizing that by holding on, we continue to drink the poison long after the cup has been emptied. To let go of pain is to free yourself, not the other. It is to put down the burden you were never meant to carry forever. The past has already happened. Only resistance keeps it alive. Even our ambitions can become shackles when we cling to them too tightly. We strive, we plan, we push toward imagined futures, believing happiness lies on the far side of achievement, but in our clinging to tomorrow we overlook today. Letting go of attachment to outcomes does not mean abandoning goals. It means releasing the illusion that fulfillment depends on them. When you act without clinging to results, you discover that joy is in the doing, not in the finishing, in the journey, not the destination. The future will arrive in its own time. Life is here now, unfolding moment by moment. The art of letting go is perhaps best learned from nature. See how the trees release their leaves each autumn. Not with resistance, but with grace, trusting that spring will bring new growth. See how the ocean waves rise and fall without clinging to their form, dissolving into the sea only to rise again. See how clouds drift across the sky, never grasping at their shapes, changing endlessly without regret. In each case, letting go is not an act of force, but the natural rhythm of life itself. To resist this rhythm is to suffer, to align with it is to be free. Many spiritual traditions speak of surrender, of yielding to the flow of life or to the divine. This is not a call to passivity, but an invitation to intimacy with existence. To surrender is to see that the dancer and the dancer are not two. You are not a separate self struggling against the universe. You are the universe experiencing itself as you. When this truth is glimpsed, letting go ceases to feel like sacrifice and becomes the most natural act in the world. The hands open, the breath deepens, the struggle softens, and life is lived rather than controlled. Letting go also reveals a subtle joy in impermanence. When we cling, we fear the passing of things. When we release, we discover that the passing itself is beautiful. A sunset is magnificent precisely because it fades. A melody is moving because it ends. A moment is precious because it cannot be repeated. If life were fixed and unchanging, it would be a prison, not a gift. It is the dance of arising and passing, the flow of form into emptiness and emptiness into form, that gives life its richness. To let go is to step fully into this dance, unafraid of its changing steps. Of course, letting go is not something we accomplish once and for all. It is a continual practice, a daily invitation. Each moment presents us with something to release, a thought we don't need, an expectation that constrains us, a fear that limits us, a memory that weighs us down. To let go is not to push these things away, but simply to stop clinging to them, to allow them to pass as all things do. It is a gentle shift from grasping to openness, from control to trust. And with each act of letting go, life becomes lighter, freer, more spacious. In the end, the art of letting go is the art of living itself. For what is life but a continuous letting go? Each breath is an act of release. Each night an act of surrender. Each change an invitation to open. To live fully is to let each moment come and go without resistance, without fear, without clinging. When we live this way, we discover a deep peace, not because everything is as we wished, but because we no longer demand that it be so. We allow life to be life, and in doing so, we discover that we are not apart from it, but it itself. Got it? Here's the full 3,000-word expansion of your keynote No. 3, written in a continuous narrative style without headings or an ending sentence every single day. The mind is constantly bombarded with voices, doubts, and distractions that try to pull a person away from who they truly are and what they are meant to do. These voices come from the outside world, opinions, criticisms, societal expectations, pressures from family and peers, but they also come from within, whispers of fear, insecurity, and hesitation that creep into the heart and convince a person that they are not enough. This is one of the greatest battles anyone faces, the internal war between belief and disbelief, between clarity and confusion, between purpose and distraction. If left unchecked, these voices grow louder, and they begin to shape the very identity of a person, making them think small, act small, and settle for less than they are truly capable of becoming. To overcome this, one must develop the inner discipline to master the mind, to filter out the noise, and to root themselves in truth, strength, and unwavering vision. Without this mastery, the mind becomes like a wild horse running in every direction, dragging the individual into paths that lead nowhere, exhausting energy on things that never mattered, and wasting precious years of life on pursuits that never satisfied the soul. The world has a way of making distractions look urgent, almost convincing people that if they don't follow what others are doing, they will be left behind. Social media, for example, is designed to constantly compare, to make individuals believe that everyone else is ahead, that someone else's timeline must also be their own. But the truth is, purpose is never found by copying the path of another person. It is discovered by listening to that inner calling, that quiet but persistent voice that keeps reminding the soul of what it was created for. This is why mastering the mind is not just about ignoring negativity, it is about discerning which voice to listen to, which thought to feed, and which desire aligns with the deeper mission that gives life meaning. Most people, however, never reach this point because they are too distracted, too overwhelmed by the chaos of daily life, chasing things that seem urgent but have no eternal weight, running after approval but never finding peace. The real work begins when a person learns to step back, to detach from the noise, and to sit in silence long enough to hear themselves think, long enough to distinguish what is theirs and what has been imposed upon them. In that silence, patterns begin to appear, and it becomes clear that not every thought is trustworthy, not every feeling is accurate, and not every voice deserves attention. The mind is capable of producing both lies and truths, and unless a person takes control, the lies will dominate, feeding insecurity and paralysis. Fear often disguises itself as logic, whispering reasons why the dream is too risky, too unrealistic, too impossible. Doubt disguises itself as wisdom, presenting caution not because it is safe, but because it keeps the person from moving forward. And distraction disguises itself as opportunity, offering endless side paths that look good but ultimately drain focus from the real mission. To rise above this requires awareness, a conscious recognition that the mind must be trained like a muscle, conditioned to stay aligned with vision instead of wandering aimlessly in every direction. This is why discipline is essential, not just physical discipline, but mental and emotional discipline. The ability to say no to what looks appealing but does not serve the mission, the courage to refuse temporary pleasures in pursuit of long-term fulfillment. People who achieve greatness are not those who never feel fear or doubt. They are those who acknowledge the voices but choose not to obey them. They hear the whispers of limitation, but they do not feed them. Instead, they build daily rituals, habits, and mindsets that keep their vision alive even when the world tries to bury it. For some, it may be morning reflection, journaling, meditation, or prayer. For others, it may be immersing themselves in study in silence or in relentless action. Whatever the method, the key is consistency, because the mind, left unguarded for too long, will always drift back toward weakness, negativity, and conformity. Just as the body weakens without exercise, the mind weakens without discipline. Mastery is not a one-time achievement. It is a daily commitment, a constant redirection, a lifelong battle against the pull of mediocrity. The danger of not mastering the mind is that life begins to feel like it is controlled by outside forces rather than inner conviction. People start living by default, reacting instead of creating, following instead of leading, settling instead of pursuing. They let circumstances dictate their moods, let setbacks dictate their worth, and let the opinions of others dictate their destiny. This reactive way of living robs them of freedom, because true freedom comes only when a person can rise above circumstance and remain grounded in identity and purpose. Without this grounding, every failure feels like the end, every rejection feels like proof of unworthiness, and every delay feels like a sign to quit. But when the mind is mastered, setbacks become lessons, rejections become redirections, and delays become preparation. The same storm that breaks one person strengthens another, not because the storm is different, but because the mind is different. History is filled with individuals who refused to be enslaved by their own thoughts, who chose to rise above the limitations that others accepted. They were not superhuman. They simply developed the habit of aligning their minds with their vision and refusing to let fear dictate their choices. Great thinkers, leaders, and creators all shared one common trait. They knew how to silence the noise and focus relentlessly on the mission at hand. They understood that distractions are not just harmless delays, they are thieves of destiny, robbing people of time they will never get back. Every hour wasted on comparison, on self-doubt, on meaningless pursuits, is an hour stolen from the pursuit of purpose. Once this truth is realized, the urgency to master the mind becomes undeniable because the cost of not doing so is simply too great. The modern world is uniquely designed to test mental discipline more than ever before. With constant notifications, endless content, and unlimited entertainment, it is easier to consume than to create, easier to scroll than to think, easier to imitate than to innovate. The trap is subtle because these distractions don't always look harmful. In fact, they often look harmless, even enjoyable. But when days turn into months and months turn into years, it becomes clear that the greatest enemy of purpose is not failure but distraction. Failure at least teaches, but distraction deceives, making a person believe they are busy while they are actually drifting. To escape this, a person must ruthlessly guard their focus, protecting their time and energy as if it were treasure, because in truth it is. The journey of mastering the mind is never about perfection. It is about progress, about winning more battles today than yesterday, about becoming a little stronger, a little more disciplined, a little more focused every single day. It is about catching the lies quicker, silencing the doubts sooner, and refusing to waste time on what no longer aligns with who you are becoming. Slowly, these small victories add up, and they reshape identity until the person who once felt powerless begins to walk with confidence, no longer defined by fear but defined by faith, not enslaved by distraction but driven by vision. This is the transformation that comes when the mind is no longer the master but the servant, when it becomes a tool used for building rather than a cage used for confinement. And once this level of mastery is reached, the entire life begins to shift. Opportunities are no longer missed because of hesitation. Dreams are no longer abandoned because of fear. Time is no longer wasted on meaningless pursuits. Instead, energy flows in one clear direction, vision sharpens, and momentum builds. The person who once doubted themselves becomes unstoppable, not because the world changed, but because their mind did. The strength of a person is never measured in the moments when life is comfortable and everything is falling into place. Real strength reveals itself in seasons of hardship, in nights when sleep will not come, in days when every step feels heavier than the last. Struggle is the furnace where identity is shaped, where courage is tested, where perseverance is forged into something that cannot be shaken. The truth is that without struggle there can be no strength, without resistance there can be no growth, and without pressure there can be no transformation. Many people long for an easy life, a life without difficulties, but if life were to remove every obstacle and every challenge, it would also remove the very things that give depth to character, resilience to spirit, and meaning to success. Diamonds are not formed in comfort. They are created under unimaginable pressure. The seed does not break open without being buried in darkness, and the warrior is not trained without facing battles that demand everything from them. It is often in the silence of struggle that a person learns who they truly are. When the applause is gone, when no one is watching, when everything feels like it is collapsing, that is when a person's real foundation is revealed. Many people carry an image of strength when things are easy, but it is in the seasons of loss, failure, or rejection that the mask is stripped away and the truth emerges. This truth can be terrifying because it forces a person to confront their own fragility, their own doubts, their own weaknesses. Yet it is in this confrontation that the seeds of strength are planted. Only when the soul is pressed to its limit does it discover the hidden reserves of resilience it never knew existed. Pain has a way of awakening dormant strength, suffering has a way of forcing growth, and trials have a way of refining vision until only what truly matters remains. The temptation during struggle is to run, to escape, to find the nearest comfort that promises relief. But every time a person chooses comfort over confrontation, they rob themselves of the growth that the struggle was designed to bring. Struggle is not a punishment, it is preparation. It prepares the heart to endure, the mind to focus, and the spirit to rise above circumstances. It strips away illusions of control, teaching that not everything can be manipulated or avoided, but it also teaches that not everything needs to be. Sometimes the point of struggle is not to overcome the outside world, but to conquer the inner one, to silence fear, to break through limitations, and to learn that weakness can coexist with determination. The greatest victories are rarely external. They are internal shifts that redefine what is possible. Every person who has ever accomplished something of value has walked through struggle. They have felt the loneliness of being misunderstood, the pain of failing despite giving their best, the frustration of waiting when everything inside them screamed for progress. Yet these experiences carved within them a depth of strength that comfort could never provide. It is easy to celebrate the finished product, the success, the breakthrough, but what truly shapes destiny is the unseen process of endurance, the countless days of persistence when nothing seemed to change, the refusal to quit when every reason to quit was present. This is where true greatness is born, in the shadows of struggle where faith and grit are the only companions. Struggle also reveals perspective. The same hardship that crushes one person elevates another, not because the challenge is different, but because the mindset is. One sees struggle as a curse, the other sees it as a teacher. One sees it as an end, the other sees it as a beginning. This shift in perception is powerful because struggle is never neutral. It either weakens or strengthens, depending on how it is received. To see struggle as preparation is to unlock its hidden purpose, to understand that every season of difficulty carries within it lessons that cannot be learned in ease. Patience is not learned in abundance, it is learned in waiting. Gratitude is not deepened in plenty, it is deepened in lack. Courage is not discovered in safety, it is revealed in fear. These virtues, which form the foundation of strength, are only born in the womb of struggle. The human spirit is built to rise, but it will never rise without resistance. Just as muscles grow only when they are torn through exercise, the soul grows only when it is stretched by challenges. What feels like breaking is often building. What feels like the end is often the beginning of transformation. The moments that feel unbearable are often the very moments that expand capacity, teaching that a person can endure far more than they imagined. The beauty of struggle is that it exposes limits and then shatters them, proving that limits are rarely real but often self-imposed. Every time a person survives what they thought would destroy them, they are never the same again because they have seen their own strength with clarity. There is also a sacredness to struggle, a quiet truth that in those moments of desperation, a deeper connection is often formed with what is eternal. Many people only discover the depths of faith, hope, or purpose when they are stripped of everything else. Struggle pushes a person beyond self-reliance, reminding them that strength does not always come from within but often from above, from that unseen source that steadies the soul when human endurance runs out. In the silence of pain, many discover their most profound clarity, their clearest vision, and their strongest sense of purpose. What they thought was meant to break them becomes the very thing that aligns them with a higher calling. But struggle is not a single event, it is a cycle that repeats in different forms throughout life. Each stage brings new challenges, new pressures, new uncertainties, and each one requires a fresh commitment to endure. Some struggles last days, others years, but all of them leave an imprint on the soul. The scars they leave behind are not signs of weakness, but badges of survival, reminders that pain was endured and growth was achieved. A scar is proof that the wound was real, but also that healing took place, that the person moved forward despite it all. These marks of struggle become part of identity, shaping not only how a person sees themselves, but also how they can inspire and strengthen others. When one learns to embrace struggle rather than fear it, life transforms. Struggle stops being an enemy and becomes a companion, a strange but faithful friend that shapes character, strengthens resolve, and teaches lessons that cannot be learned in comfort. Instead of asking why me, the question becomes, what is this teaching me? How is this shaping me? What strength is being born within me? With this mindset, no struggle is wasted, no pain is meaningless, no hardship is without purpose. Even in the most difficult moments, meaning can be found, because every struggle carries the potential to elevate if the person chooses to rise instead of collapse. The irony is that the very things people try hardest to avoid, pain, difficulty, obstacles, are often the very things that prepare them for the life they desire. Without these struggles, success would be shallow, victories would lack depth, and achievements would hold no weight. Struggle gives meaning to triumph, it adds value to growth, it transforms victories into stories worth telling. To live without struggle is to live without strength, and to live without strength is to drift through life unprepared for its inevitable storms. But to walk through struggle with resilience is to become unshakable, to carry within oneself a strength that no circumstance can take away, a strength that was not given freely but earned in the fire of hardship,